All right, so stress and heart disease. So I'm sorry, I read sadness as stress. Sadness and heart disease. Pessimists are more likely than optimists to develop heart disease. Pessimists can be, encapsulated in the person of Eeyore, right? Where, oh, no, it's not going to work. I was just reading a book to my granddaughter, one of the Winnie the Pooh books, and boy, the movies, Eeyore doesn't seem quite as pathetic, but man, he is the saddest, most pessimistic creature. He's like, well, it was his birthday, and nobody was going to remember my birthday, that kind of thing. Um, you know, I don't know how long Eeyore lived, but I'm going to guess not as long as like Pooh, who was more of an optimist, right? Um, so pessimists are more likely than optimists to develop heart disease. Depression, so not just sadness, but depression increases the risk of death, especially from cardiovascular disease. A very significant, major depression can cause these outcomes. And then chronic stress triggers persistent inflammation, which increases the risk of heart disease and depression. So inflammation is one of the big problems that stress can cause. Inflammation is, when your body releases a bunch of cytokines and other things that can cause your body to be basically under stress all the time because of the chemicals that it itself is secreting. So this persistent inflammation has been implicated in heart disease. It's also been implicated in depression. Now, with both depression and heart disease, all we know is that these things go together. We don't know that the inflammation causes the heart disease. We don't know that inflammation causes depression. We just know that you are more likely to develop heart disease if you have persistent inflammation. You are more likely to have persistent inflammation if you are under chronic stress. All right, so how is sadness itself, per se, stressful? Well, our coping strategies can increase the stressfulness of an emotional response. There are two main ways of coping with stressors. The problem-focused coping strategy is to look at, okay, here my stressor is traffic on the way to work, right? So what am I going to do to make this less stressful? So I'm going to focus on the problem and I'm going to say, okay, what can I do to make my commute less stressful? I could move closer to work. I could try and take the bus so I don't have to worry about driving and I could get some work done while I'm on the bus. I could get a carpool partner and ride in the carpool lane. I don't think we have carpool lanes in the Spokane area. Back when I lived in the Seattle area, that was actually a strategy I tried to use. I tried to get my kids to go to the school where I was teaching so that I could carpool, reduce my stress. So these are like things that you could try to do to make the actual situation less stressful. Let's say that your stress is having lots of deadlines and piles of work to do, and you're being overwhelmed, right? Like I don't even know how I'm going to get all this done, and I'm supposed to get it all done. So problem focused strategies that you could try to do to establish to deal with that kind of stressor is to work on your own time management. For example, you could say, okay, I have to figure out how many hours I'm here at work, what all I need to get done, maybe create a to-do list is on the far right side and figure out what has to be done today, what could maybe roll to tomorrow, these kinds of things. Maybe I could ask for support, say to my supervisor, okay, I've done my to-do list. I figured out how much time every task is going to take, and I have, 10 hours worth of work and an 8-hour workday. So I'm going to need some help. Like I can't get this done. My daughter recently had that experience. She's working for a very quickly growing company, and it's being implicated. There are some national policies that are having some implications for this company, and so it's causing a lot of their clients to email them. And my daughter's in charge of clearing the email box, and she let the owner of the company know, okay, so I spent 4 straight hours clearing the email box, and when I got there were 350 emails. I cleared out 200 of them And when I was done working on those 200, I got back in the email box and now there were 400 emails. Like that's how many more had come in while I was trying to answer the ones that I tried to answer. And so she said, I need help. And they actually hired 4 more people because of what's going on right now and the acuteness of the situation, 4 more people to help her. Cause I mean, you can like, how stressful is it where you're supposed to only work for 4 hours a day for this company and you spend 4 hours a day and you're actually in a worse position than you were when you started, right? Like, oh no, all that work and nothing's really changed. Like it's gotten worse. That's really stressful, right? Establishing healthy boundaries. That's another really important thing that a lot of us don't do. You know, like in my daughter's case with that example, she is only supposed to work 4 hours a day for this client. And, you know, she has to tell them literally, that's all I can do. This is all the time I have for you. So I can't just work harder or longer. You're going to have to get support, right? Like that's hard. But that's in problem focused coping. That's how you deal with it, right? You try and figure out something concrete that you can do to actually change the situation. With emotion focused coping, you recognize that maybe there's nothing you can do to change the situation. It is what it is. So for example, for most of the time that I was commuting on the west side of the state, I didn't have a child I could throw into the car and make them commute with me and stuff like that. I just had to face the fact that I had a traffic filled commute on my way to work. Like it is what it is. There's nothing I could do. I couldn't move closer to work given the difference in the housing prices between where I lived and where work was. I couldn't do it. So what can you do? Well, focus on your emotions, right? Try and figure out some way to make it less stressful on you, even though you have to be in that situation. So maybe you could exercise, or in my case, one of the things I found really helped my emotions was listening to a book on tape on the way to work so that I would get engaged. I would be completely swept away. And there were times when I was kind of disappointed when I got to work, you know, because I was like, man, I'm at a crux in this book. I don't want to stop. And so that would be an example of emotion focused coping. I'm still in the situation. There's nothing I can do about it, but at least I'm not getting stressed by it. I'm enjoying my commute rather than being mad at it the whole time. You know, depending on what your stressor is, maybe taking a bath would be relaxing, or giving yourself a big pep talk, or meditating, which we're going to talk about later. So there are things that you can do to just sort of manage your response. And so really it's a matter of what the stressor is, how much control you have over the stressor and things like that, that'll determine whether problem-focused coping is going to work or emotion-focused coping is going to work. Let's talk a little bit about control over the situation. All right. You guys have probably heard of learned helplessness because you've had introductory psychology. So you might have heard about the dog studies that was done in the 1950s. So I'm going to tell you about a rat study that was done in the 1980s. So what we have is 3 rats. We have the executive rat on the left, the subordinate in the middle, and the control rat on the right. Both of the executive rat and the subordinate rat are going to get shocked. When the shock comes, it's going to come through that little shock source to both of their tails. The control rat's not going to get shocked at all. All 3 of them have a wheel that they can spin, but the executive rat, when he or she rolls the wheel, it turns off the shock to both their own tail and to the subordinate rat's tail. So the executive rat actually has the ability to stop the shock. The subordinate rat has no ability to stop the shock. He's completely at the whim of the executive rat's wheel spinning. So the executive rat can turn off the shock. What they found is that the subordinate rat had increased ulcers after having this experience, compared to the executive rat and the control rat who had no increased ulcers. The executive rat had no increased ulcers relative to the control rat. So it wasn't stressful in the same way for the executive rat as it was for the subordinate rat. So what they concluded is that having control helps to buffer some of the effects of, random bad things happening. So stress is harmful when there is a sense of loss of personal control. I see I have some kind of weird grammatical error in the middle of this. A good time to point out I create all my own PowerPoints, so that's all me. Stress is harmful when there is a sense of loss of personal control. I don't know what happened there. So yeah, if you feel like you can't control the outcome, there's nothing you can do. it's going to be much more stressful and more likely to have these physical effects. So uncontrollable bad events tend to lead to a perceived lack of control, which then can lead to generalized helplessness behavior. We saw that in the dogs in the original research on learned helplessness, where they put dogs into crates with a divider in the middle of the crate. And for half of the dogs, when the grid underneath them got electrified, if they hopped over that center divider, they stopped getting shocked. The other side wasn't electrified. But the other half of the dogs, if they jumped across the divider, the shock was on that side too. They couldn't escape the shock. What they found is that those who couldn't escape the shock had the physical bad effects, and they developed this generalized helpless behavior where once the situation changed and they actually could jump over the barrier and escape the shock, they didn't even try. It looked like they were sad dogs. Like they were just waiting for the next shock to come on, and then they just tried to endure it. And it was a bad situation for the dogs. This is an example of the kind of thing we might experience when, bad stuff happens. There's nothing we can do to escape it, and that's going to have a negative effect on us. And one of the negative effects is it's going to cause us to feel sad, and it's also possibly going to have an increase in the future of us behaving in a way like we don't have control over things. And so even when we are in a situation where we could have control, we could change the outcome, we don't even try. We're like, and that looks like a sad person, right? When you don't even bother to try to get yourself out of a bad situation. So this is what we're talking about with learned helplessness. And this is the key phrase there is learned. Like you're not born having this disposition towards the world. You're taught this disposition towards the world. The rats here were taught you don't have any control. There's no point in spinning your wheels. So that's what we mean by that. So why does personal control affect stress? Why does that have an effect on stress? So there's our little model again. Losing control, feeling like there's nothing you can do, increases those stress hormones. That right there by itself is a stressor that causes you to release cortisol. So if you realize that there's nothing you can do in a circumstance, your body's going to respond to that awareness by secreting stress hormones. Those stress hormones cause your blood pressure to increase. That's one of the things that they do because they're getting you ready for a fight or a flight, right? So your blood pressure increases, and your immune responses decrease as a function of that. And so you're going to have this flow from loss of control, blood pressure increase to I'm going to become more vulnerable to illnesses. Increasing control has noticeably improved health and morale in prison and nursing home studies. They've been looking at incarcerated people who live in nursing homes, and they realize that one of the things that can contribute to sadness and hopelessness is feeling completely out of control, that there's nothing that the person can do to even make the smallest decision for themselves. So giving people an opportunity to make choices or to have a little bit of autonomy boosts their morale, boosts their mood, makes them less vulnerable to these negative outcomes. Now, having said all that, we have to keep in mind that having too many choices can actually be harmful too. The term "the tyranny of choice" was coined. I think it was coined by Barry Schwartz, is who I think coined it. But I've seen other people publish books with that title, so I'm not sure who officially coined it. Here's a picture of a grocery store in the U.S. One of the biggest problems with our grocery stores is there's too many choices. Like just go into the grocery store and try and decide which jar of strawberry jam you want to buy. Just strawberry. I already narrowed you down. You only get to pick strawberry. The problem is there's many more choices than that, right? There's strawberry, raspberry, marmalade, plum, grape. There's all sorts of choices of flavors, but I've just narrowed you down to strawberry. So if all you can pick is strawberry, there's probably at least 4 different types of strawberry that you could buy just from Smucker's, right? There's preserves, there's jam, there's jelly. Maybe there's only 3 just from Smucker's. Oh no, there's low sugar. So just from the brand name Smucker's, you have 4 choices. And then of course there are multiple brands usually at every store of strawberry jam. Every day you have to make a choice about a whole bunch of different things. And that can be overwhelming and can make us develop a little learned helplessness where we just go, forget it, I can't even decide. I don't even know where to start to decide. Or it can cause you to just go ahead and dig a rut like I do. It's like, okay, well, I'm always just buying. I don't even think about it. This is the jar of strawberry jam I'm buying. I buy strawberry jam. That's it. Buying strawberry jam. I don't even care if you introduce something else. This is the one I'm buying. I don't see anything else. This is it. Because there's just too many choices. And it's one of the things that makes Costco really popular is that there aren't many choices, right? When you go in to buy toothpaste, I think they carry one kind. Maybe they carry two. I think they carry the Sensodyne for sensitive teeth, and then I think they carry the Crest, and I think that's it. That's it. No choice. This is it. Take your toothpaste if you want it, and that actually eases people's minds. If you go to the toothpaste aisle at a grocery store and you look at all the choices, or worse, go to the Walmart that carries every brand that ever existed. How are you supposed to decide? Right. And so a lot of people can get a little learned helplessness from that, and it can make people really ultimately sad. So I would recommend do what I do and just always buy the same one of everything. Get in a rut. I was having to buy a new car because I got rear-ended and my car got totaled. So I'm like, I have to buy a new car. And my husband and my son were both like, oh, you should get a different make of car. You always buy the same kind. And I looked at a couple of others fleetingly. I was like, well, I mean, that one looks okay, but I know what I'll get if I just buy the same one. Like, why am I taxing myself just because you guys are acting like I'm in a rut and should get a different car? Like, I know how these run. I know that it fits me correctly. I know that I know what the automatic extras are. I know like all the things about this car. Why would I bother? Right? I don't want to be tyrannized by choice. I just want to pick something and go about my life. And so that's my one tip. Exert your personal control by not letting choice tyrannize you. And then I will leave you in this little section with one last thought. This is one of the things that makes it really hard to date these days. If you don't already have a mate, I would like to say to all the single people out there, the fact that you can always just swipe and find somebody else, or especially if you're female and you put yourself onto the apps and you get all these phishing, emails from men who are interested, it makes you feel like there's so many choices. Like everybody out there is interested or interesting. And what if I pick the wrong person, I may end up with, I missed somebody. And it's kind of a new thing that's happening thanks to these apps. It's because it used to be people sort of just dated in their group and in their locale or wherever was around. They met each other at school or at work or like church, or like this is how you met people. Now there's this sense of everybody's out there and I don't want to pick the wrong person. And that's the tyranny of choice at work. And so it can immobilize people, and people end up not making any choice because the choices look unending. So that's my last little tip, a little human sexuality in the middle of our emotions and emotional intelligence class. All right. Good time to stop. Let's go ahead and stop here, and we'll come back and talk about locus of control.